Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for August. I know, time is creeping on. There's only one thing to do. To look at doing things slightly differently. So we are going to be speaking to a person tonight, or today, or tomorrow, depending whenever you listen, who are bringing their game Lander to Kickstarter, and are looking at a particularly different way of engaging with people before the campaign. The company is called Intrepid Games. The person is Mr. Don Alexander. He's not, it's Dan Alexander. It's just, I'm just being nasty as usual. But anyway, hi Dan, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, David. Sorry, Richard.
Yeah, it's going to be that type. It's going to be that type of conversation, isn't it? Yeah, you've kind of completely thrown me. I don't know what to say. Well, I do want to say thank you for coming on. The reason that we do this is quite simple, is because there's not enough podcasts out there about tabletop and board gaming. I've checked, scoured the internet, can't find any. And the other reason that we do this is because Dan got in contact and said, I'd like to tell you about this fantastic game I put together. And I went, okay. And then we've been having conversations back and forward about him coming on to have a conversation about his game. So which is why he is here. Do you, to start things off, and it is probably the most boring question to start any tabletop podcast, is how did you get into the hobby kind of in the first place? How do you remember, about your journey into the pressed and printed trees?
I think the experience started when I was young, when my grandfather would play chess with me, and he would mercilessly beat me game after game after game.
All right. I was going to say with a stick.
I mean, that was when I lost. And through playing chess through my, I guess, young years, and then playing, the sorts of games that you would in the 80s, Monopoly and Risk, Yahtzee, various different games of the time, I slowly stepped up into playing games like Catan.
Yeah.
And enjoying, the challenge of besting your friends and family, and being only slightly competitive. It became the thing whereby I'd start to, get ideas about this rule could be changed in this sort of game, and I never kind of thought I'd end up where I am today, actually making a game.
Are you the type, you mentioned you're not competitive, so you're the type of person that would prefer everybody to walk away from a gaming experience saying they had a thoroughly good time, as opposed to you kind of secretly kind of high-fiving yourself going, yup, show these group of people how I can dominate an entire board kind of thing?
I would say that it very much depends on who I'm playing with.
All right, okay.
Because being super competitive, there's no point being super competitive when you are with people who are complete noobs, because just beating someone out has no value. You have to play with people who are, as good or better than you, and then beat them. Then it means something. So, in terms of the way I play board games, I think that I would interact very differently with the different people that I would play it with.
Do you have like a main game that you would play again and again and again? And the reason behind this is because I know a lot of people who are in the hobby who, and I'm probably guilty of this, is rocking up to the club every single kind of time I'm there, with a new game that everybody has to gather around and learn the rules. So I guess for yourself, do you have like a set game that you kind of continually bring to the table, that you're kind of learning the kind of little nuances of the game, so that when you are kind of facing off against somebody, it is a complete kind of battle of wits kind of thing?
It would probably have been Catan.
Yeah.
We played it many different times, and we had the different expansions, and we played all sorts of different game variants of that. And that experience of playing that, and Risk Legacy was another one that we really enjoyed. We played the full kind of 15 goes of it, of writing stuff on the board, and those were really great memories of playing those two games. Definitely.
Is Risk Legacy a good game then? Is it? I mean, you obviously played through 15 seasons, but I had a lot of people that say it's not amazing. But I wonder if Pandemic Legacy kind of came in and did a hold my beer moment. It kind of took maybe a lot of the love that Risk Legacy had built up and kind of, I guess, ran with it.
I would say the experience of playing the game itself and adding the various different things that you do to the board and uncovering the different things that you uncover in the game. I can't say any more than that because I don't want to ruin it if you haven't played it. But it was such a great experience that it really was that kind of element of just can't wait to play it again next week kind of thing. So just had such a great time with that. That's probably one of the notable ones, especially from playing the previous version of Risk before that, and perhaps wanting to do some of the things in Risk Legacy that you actually get to do, and never having the balls almost to be able to actually draw on the board. So from playing those sorts of games, that's where my board gaming kind of stopped, because over the last 4.5 years of making Lander, I haven't had time to do anything else other than play Lander.
Did you look towards that for other games as well then? I mean, as you were, as you've kind of continued to build up a collection, is that the type of games that you're interested in? The ones that kind of offer a certain level of kind of, I guess, evolution in terms of the gameplay?
I would say I would like to spend my money on a game that you can play again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's a simple game like Splendor. I think you can play Splendor again and again because it's easy to teach to people, and it kind of gets them understanding the game, as it were. I'm not so fond of these games which are more just that tells a story and it's a kind of a linear thing, and once you played it, that's it kind of thing. Although it could be said Risk Legacy was like that. But because you play it over so many games, I guess it took us a long time to play 15 games, because I think we met maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks. So it probably took a year, for example, to play all 15.
Do you still have a copy of the game then? Did you hold on to the copy that you actually finished off? Was it your copy or was it somebody else's?
Oh, it was my friend's parents that got that game.
Oh, right, okay.
So I think they still have it.
Did you take a picture of it, the kind of the final layout of the map and stuff like that as a keepsake?
No. I don't think so.
Because I've seen people with their Pandemic Legacy campaign actually take the final board and kind of frame it with like cards and stuff like that as a kind of like memento. It's obviously ends up being like a kind of a complete kind of spoiler for anybody that walks into the living room and realises, oh, thanks for ruining Pandemic Legacy for me. I'll never ever have to kind of buy that game again. Thanks kind of very much for that. Cheers. In terms of your collection, then, are you quite a big collector? Would you say you're one of these people that kind of regularly jumps on kind of Kickstarters or goes out and pre-orders the kind of the latest kind of hotness?
No, definitely not. I'm the opposite of that. I'm the kind of person that buys or finds something that is really good, and then we'll just play kind of one thing in depth to really fully explore and understand the nuances of that game.
So, for example, I mean, what have you bought kind of recently? Do you do a lot of research then? I mean, do you like to even kind of like go as far as getting a demo of the game before you would commit to going ahead and buying it?
Maybe, but I haven't played any other board games other than Lander in about 4.5 years.
Really?
Yeah. It's been very much a journey of having to spend all my available free time around my day job working on Lander, and working on Lander can consist of playing the game and playing it with different people around the world. My day job enables me to go around the world, and I take the game with me and play it with all sorts of different types of people, styles of gamer and ages and so on and so forth. And in doing that, I've probably played about 750 games of Lander in 4.5 years.
And do you log them all as well? Do you log them all with like the outcomes and stuff like that as well, with kind of like notes?
No, more just get a feel for that the game is kind of working and flowing correctly. And if it's not, then make a note and send that note to my friend who I'm working on the game with, Sean, and then we'll then investigate that. And we've had a policy of not making knee-jerk kind of reactions to everything, and more just taking the odd note when it comes up, and then if you find that kind of element reoccurring, being in a situation whereby that's when we'll actually then think about making some changes. So in terms of my board gaming, I've maybe in 4.5 years played a couple of different games when I've been to different board game clubs around the world. Yeah. But it's really infrequent.
What made you decide to kind of pick up the white paper and the pen and start on Lander in the first place?
It was Boxing Day in 2014, and went round to my friend and his parents to play Catan, and they weren't really feeling it after Christmas, and there was just he and I sat in a room surrounded by all our favourite games. We had Catan there, and Risk and Battlestar Galactica, Munchkin, a whole load of different things, and you can't play any of those games with two people. And he just turned to me and said, "Shall we make a game?" And in a few seconds, I just kind of went, "Yeah, okay." And then from there, we got some paper and coloured pens out and just started to play nothing. And it was kind of one of those things whereby, like, what should we have in our game? Like, what rules? And both of us being quite keen sci-fi fans, it's like, well, should we have some kind of space game? Like, yeah, okay. And then once you've kind of settled on the theme, it's like, and what should it be about? And then, because I just, the week before, played a game of Risk whereby I physically had the biggest army I'd ever amassed in Risk ever.
Yeah.
And it left my go. And before it got back to me, I was completely eliminated due to, like, statistically impossibly bad dice rolls.
Yeah.
When he asked me, like, what rules should we have in the game and what elements we should have in the game, my first answer, I like kind of screamed at him, no dice. And that was the first ever rule of Lander, that there would be no dice in the game. And on from there, the conversation just kind of expanded on different elements, and what you might see in Lander is some of all of our favourite games. We kind of took the best bits of all of our favourite games and the elements of the games which frustrated us for one reason or another. We took those so that they weren't in Lander.
Did you, is the version that you've taken to Kickstarter, is that vastly different from the one that you had in your hands, like, say, like 2 years ago? Have you made substantial changes to the game since it was kind of like first kind of put together?
Well, what's quite interesting about the journey is that we started making this game, and it was a battling game. And you would develop a crew, and the idea would be that you'd go to another planet and you'd battle against each other. And through the course of the game, you'd level up against each other, and then fight each other, and then win. And we went down this road for, 4 to 6 months, something like that, and had a situation whereby we just didn't like it. It didn't make sense, and we kind of went back to the drawing board in, why would you go to another planet and then fight against each other? And I think one of the key elements of our journey is trying to get the story right, and for everything to be logical in order to move forward. So we had to go right back. We could have just stopped what we were doing there and then, but something made us feel like we'd done a reasonable amount of work, and there were some things that we really liked. So we'd made this crew of 60 people. Yeah. And we had this idea for these triangles to give us resources. And we took both of those elements and then went in like a complete different direction. So for the first 4 to 6 months, I think that game was a markedly different game to where Lander is now. But from that pivot, I think the Lander then is very similar in some respects to where Lander is now, but with 4 years of polish. And the game itself hasn't changed much, but it has at the same time. So, for example, we have an event deck in the game, and that has had 10 iterations, like 10 full overhauls to actually get it right. We've had things added that we call the accolade deck. So in Catan, you have the longest road, and it's a side focus for you to be able to achieve extra victory points. Yeah. And we played the game with some guys in Q8 City. It was a really great game, and they said that there was no kind of side focus. So immediately having that information and having Catan as a big inspiration to the game, it's like, okay, well, how do I make that happen in Lander? And then kind of came up with these accolades. And a number of other things in the game in terms of the refinement is the refinement of the English language. I would say one of the hardest things to get right is to be able to write an instruction in English and have it not be ambiguous, and refining the wording on. I think the game has about 550 cards.
That's making a reasonable size of cards.
Just making sure that every card that's kind of spoken or played or what have you, that it's kind of follows a game mechanic, follows on theme. It's clear that it's not going to cause world-ending arguments around a board gaming table, that sort of thing. That's what's taken the time.
Yeah, there's the whole thing about the Oxford comma, isn't there? I see that kind of argument coming up a couple of times. No, but I mean, I've seen games which are universally loved, and you go to Board Game Geek and they've got like huge FAQs on there with people kind of asking kind of question after question after question, because there's, you're right, kind of like if there's a bit of ambiguity with the rules in it, when you're playing a game, anything that stops you from actually playing that game, if it's like a rules check or something like that, can have a negative impact on the kind of the overall the experience of the game. If you're like saying, well, I've got to go back, it was brilliant, but there's nothing I think worse than kind of dead time, where 4 of you are sitting around just kind of wondering when you can continue, and you've got one person kind of frantically kind of flicking through the kind of the rule book as well. You mentioned playtesting, and you mentioned Q8 City. So you mentioned, obviously, one of the things you said was your job takes you kind of quite far and wide. Has that kind of helped to educate you on how people play games in kind of like different countries as well? How people are likely to kind of approach playing a certain game as well. I mean, to me, I know a lot of people who they play test their game at maybe the 3 or 4 groups that they go to, and then they'll take it to like a convention to kind of play test it further and get some feedback. But how helpful do you think it was in kind of like having kind of like a worldwide group of playtesting to make kind of Lander where it was today?
I think it's been really interesting to understand how non-native English speakers relate to a game that has a reasonable degree of English language throughout it. Mm-hmm. And that has been a really interesting discovery, because you might imagine that everyone is fluent in the language, and when you take it to play with people who English is their second or maybe third or maybe fourth language that they know, and you see them struggling or not, and those kind of things have been quite an interesting learning experience. And what we had with the game was a lot of technically correct scientific language, and we were quite proud, I think maybe 2.5 years ago, to have this game which was like really nerdy in its design and everything being right. And what I found through playtesting internationally is a lot of people didn't know what those words meant, so therefore they couldn't interact and relate to the game as well, even though these words were flavor text.
Yes.
So in playing it with this wide international community, I would say the biggest and most fascinating thing is that we changed all of that language and just stripped it out of the game. So now at the top of the card, we don't have a very clever, complicated header. It says something like kill crew or free upgrade. And and understanding how to make the game have very simple instructions in language that everyone can hear is probably what I've learned from that international playtesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's in terms of playing the game. I mean, let's get into the gameplay side of things. I mean, if I've sat down in front of you at the table, you've set Lander up. What am I going to be doing in the game? What's an example of how I would kind of like play around?
We have made a modular board.
Mm-hmm.
So Carcassonne being an influence where you have tile placement. And we've made a modular board that expands as you play. So Lander has a number of different interesting elements to it, in so far as you have a board which is different every time. There's a couple of tile trays, and these have resources on them, so energy, food, and titanium. And each of the tiles we call sectors, and these sectors produce different values. And you have an engine, which is this board which you are expanding and upgrading and getting your resources in. But separately to that, you also have a crew, and you start off with 2 crew members that come out from stasis. And we've crash landed on this first planet outside of our solar system with liquid water on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in a situation whereby you start with kind of almost nothing, and you get a few resources, and you get some action cards and training and item cards. And what you're looking at doing is, over the course of the game, developing your crew, getting more crew members from stasis, training them with different training cards, equipping them with different items, playing different action cards, so the game has a high degree of player interaction through these action cards. And through the development of the board and your crew, your aim of the game is to complete missions. And the player who completes the most mission stars wins the game. And there are 3 different game styles. And these game styles actually came out from going to the UK Games Expo back in 2017. And we came with this 50 minutes per player game. Like, hey guys, come play our game.
Yeah,
and people looked at us like we were idiots. Like, no, we're at an expo. We've got to see all of the stuff here, and we can give you a short period of time.
Yeah. And
on the fly, literally within 15 minutes, like for the first, say, 3 hours of being there, I'm seeing this as an issue and a barrier, and no one playing the game with us. Just over kind of 15 minutes around lunchtime on the first day, we kind of jerry-rigged this very rough, quick version of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had people play it and love it and so on. And it led, being first-time game designers, it led to this whole study of is game time significant? And we have found that it is. People will choose to play a game or not based on the available time, the time that it says on the box. And this, being new information to us, was very interesting. And actually, we split the game up into 3 different styles of play because we went with the full Lander experience, this 50 minutes per player game. We made an easier version.
Yeah.
And that played at 30 minutes per player. And then in introducing that, we had feedback where people would say to us, like there were too many decision points was the overarching feedback note that we made. So we further stripped it back, and now we have basic simulation, which is 20 minutes per player, and is a full enjoyable game in its own right, and that has a win condition of the first player to achieve 7 mission stars wins. When you go to the early arrival game variation, then the first player to achieve 10 mission stars, the game just doesn't end. It signals the last round, so that the last year of play, and all players play out that year until somebody has the most mission stars. So somebody might trigger the game on 10 mission stars, somebody else might win on 12, for example. And then what we call the planned arrival is the highest number of mission stars in 5 years, 5 rounds of play. And each game plays strategically differently and kind of fills that time niche in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all very well, as you say, getting people around to actually play the game. I think one of the people that I thought did it really well was James Naylor, he's about to release Magnet, the First City. And the way that he did demos is he basically split it into like 3 sections. And he said, okay, the bigger game is bigger. He says, but what we're going to do is we're going to play 3 rounds at the beginning of the game, and then what I'm going to do is you're going to give me 2 minutes, and then I'm going to set up the scenario for like the final 2 rounds of the game, so you can see what happens kind of like at the very, very end. So there wasn't the kind of bit where you missed out on some of the mechanics that were there, and also you didn't miss out on kind of the end game, so you could see how things like kind of like final scoring could work. And yeah, I mean, I totally see where you're coming from in terms of even if I'm going out to play at the local game club, we're only there from round about 6 o'clock until 9 o'clock, kind of 9:15. And it usually takes, with any game, it usually takes about half an hour for everybody to sit down, scratch their bum and decide actually what they're going to play. So if there's a huge kind of time window in getting a game kind of played, then it can put us off. But it depends how many times you've played it, because we could have played a game like 3 or 4 times, and we know how easy it is to get set up and how easy it is to kind of getting played. So for you, is the playtesting side, is getting people to actually play the game, is that a really, really important thing for you? To actually, rather than to read rule books and look at videos, to actually get them physically, get bums on seats and get them kind of playing a copy of the game, is that fairly important for yourself?
Yeah, if you're looking at making a game, I would say the key thing that I've learned in my time in making Lander is playtest, 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 playtest. I couldn't say it enough, and actually seeing people playing it and you know, not having to read the rulebook and so forth, but you tell them the game and just let them play and see how receptive they are to it, and so on and so forth. And that is the one kind of thing that I would say I've valued over this journey the most, is just the number of times I've managed to get people to play the game and to see their responses and things has effectively enabled Lander to be the game that it is today. And again, that the game in a lot of ways hasn't really changed from how it was 4 years ago, and in other ways massively has, because of all of that very, very, very like subtle fine tuning of every single part of it. And with so many cards in the games, when you have combinations between different data points, the more every number you add, it's factorially higher. And with so many things in the game and all of those elements interplaying with each other, being able to play it so many times has effectively enabled me to smooth it out as best as possible. So the game is very balanced as a result. And I would say that if anyone was looking at making a game with a number of different elements to it and having those different number of, you know, combinations of different parts, the only way you can get it to play right is to just play so many times that you see potentially those combinations actually happen.
Has it have you kept the parts that you've maybe taken out of the game to save for expansions or potential follow-ups or completely different games at all?
Not really. We have made an expansion for the game. So the game that is available, that's as part of our Play Before You Pledge campaign, is in a 2 to 4 player game, and we're going to be releasing the expansion to the game as a 5 to 6 player add-on and additional level, whereby each of the corporations, which is what you play as a player, rather than playing all the same as what they do in Lander, is that they all play differently and they all have their unique payment structures and what have you. So it's what we've taken out of the game, I would say, predominantly is language, and nothing's really come out of the game as mechanics as such.
Yeah,
but
okay.
just how the game has been refined. A 3 goes to a 2 because if it's 3, it breaks the game in certain instances.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, and that's what that refinement process has been, is just trying to see that happen in enough instances that you can say, yeah, that's too powerful, that's broken.
What made you decide to... You mentioned the Play Before You Pledge route.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do that? Because it's a big commitment in terms of resources and, finance and everything like that. Because in essence, what you're doing is you're saying, like, it's not a case of the rule book's available to download. You've, correct in saying this, you've partnered up with over 130, 140 different kind of board game kind of establishments, and sent them a copy of the game to encourage, to get people to actually be able to sit there and physically get their hands on it, yeah?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It came from, I guess, a conversation whereby about 2.5 years ago, it would have been on the back of going to the UKGE, I think, and maybe Essen. I can't remember exactly when it was, but around that time, we were starting to get people say really, really incredible things about the game. We had people at Essen coming back to us at the end of the show saying, we've played loads of games and this is our favourite of the whole show. And around then, we were starting to think, okay, well, we need to start understanding the industry that we're in a bit better, and looking around and looking at Kickstarter and what have you, because we were heading to Kickstarter, but because it was still quite early on, and we're naive and ignorant in a lot of ways, we didn't really understand what we were approaching.
Yeah.
And then in looking at Kickstarter, and you see that the industry is demanding, better games, better quality components, better artwork, and so on and so forth, that the cost of board games now for, the sorts of board games that you want to buy, they cost £100. It's a normal kind of routine price, or $100. And we were just thinking, why is it you can't play these games before you actually put your hard-earned money into your pocket and buy one of these games? And we appreciate that there's a great review system. We've got an awful lot of people who, have great reviews, but I think that, like music, board games are a personal experience. In a group of friends of 2, 3, 4 of you, you might love it, your friend might hate it, and it's the same
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
So we just had this conversation about, well, why can't that be a philosophy for the industry, almost, that people should be able to play the game before they pledge. And we just thought, well, let's look into that. And we looked at a whole load of different manufacturers on the back of Essen, and we had a list of 12, and we narrowed it down to 3, and strangely they were in a triangle around Shanghai. And in looking at all of these manufacturers, a lot of them had this minimum order quantity. So if you're game designer, they can only make 500 or 1,000 as the minimum run that they will do.
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, well, this is why, potentially one of the reasons why. And in going to China, I flew to China, and my question was, this is the vision. I think people should be able to play games before they spend their hard-earned money on a game that they don't know that they like personally. They can judge their favorite reviewers and so forth. And can you make me a print run of 100? And in chatting with these different manufacturers, Gameland, who are our chosen partner, we had a way, and they figured out a way that we can do it. And in unlocking that with them, it gave us the ability to print this small number. And then the idea was, all this time ago, before I went to China, was this idea of let's make this run and then get it out there. And we just kind of felt that it does two things in that if you think about the nature of the industry at the moment, Kickstarter is this online kind of world unto itself, and board game cafes and stores is a separate kind of world unto itself. And we just thought, well, surely we could bring the whole gaming community together and, bring the whole world together a little bit by making board game cafes like hubs of excitement. This is where the new games come out. This is why you would go to your board game cafe, not just to play any old board game, but I can go there and play this big thing that's about to happen. And we feel like being able to bring this game to a board game cafe, in inverted commas, near you, means that the real life brick and mortar stores can be supported in this way, and their businesses can thrive. The online world of Kickstarter gets a game with better feedback, because now we have this mass blind playtest from all of these hundreds of locations. Will play it with multiple people, and all of that feedback can come in, so we can make the game the best it can possibly be. And anyone backing then on Kickstarter, whether they've played it or not, can have confidence that, yeah, I'm going to give you my money whether I've played it or not, because the game will be the best it can be when it arrives on Kickstarter. So this philosophy of play before you pledge, we kind of found seemed to tick all of these boxes, and that's why we kind of we believed in it, so we wanted to put our resources into making it a reality.
Yeah, I think it can be interesting. I think it can depend on the resources the person's got in the background. I think some people come to Kickstarter with a very, very good idea and kind of minimum budget. But also, I think you're right that a lot of them have gone to manufacturers, and the manufacturers have turned around and said, your minimum order is 500 or 1,000 units. So that has kind of stopped them straight away in their tracks from saying, well, I mean, I've taken a few games for kind of preview purposes that they've got the basic stuff of the art, they've got the very, very basic components and everything like that. They've not got anything kind of more than that. And, I think you're right. If people could try the actual game, and if you're able to publish the data to say, okay, this is what people like about the game, this is what people kind of, were hesitant about the game, it's just allowing people to kind of have that choice and have to have an educated kind of decision,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's where we're really coming from. This belief that the industry wants things to be the best they can be, and the cost of games to make that is high. So people haven't got the money to just drop out, hundreds of dollars, pounds, whatever currency you're in, on all these different games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it would just be good that, because there's so many genres and types of games and style and play and things, that board games aren't exclusive, and that's the amazing thing about the industry. But surely if we as game designers want to make these good games and charge these high, ticket prices for the good quality components and art and so forth, then surely you want to know that the game is good. And been worked on. I've heard and had so many people come up to me to say that they've backed a Kickstarter, 2 years ago, and they still haven't got their thing because it hasn't been, finished yet. And my kind of viewpoint on that is, what I've learned is that having a good idea isn't good enough, because the good idea is only the beginning point. Actually playing and seeing that idea through in reality, and seeing all, where the idea breaks down that you could never have known that you didn't know over a really long period of time. That for me has been the important element of this, in that we're not taking people's money and holding on to it for years and then delivering them a product thereafter. We've taken the time to get it right, and then when we feel as though like this is almost there, we've put out what we're calling our 98% prototype to say we think this is nearly perfect, but we know it's not perfect. And now we can interact with the whole industry and get them to tell us what needs to happen just to get it to that 100% kind of ready line. And as a kind of a philosophy kind of going forward, if you're in a situation whereby you don't have the resources, what I would perhaps see potentially happening in the future would be that you have Kickstarters whereby you develop relationships with board game stores and cafes around the world, and if you believe in your idea, you get those people to back you, and you find a manufacturer that can produce a small print run, and then you just have Kickstarters that just have 100 or so backers, and they're all the board game stores and cafes, and then that's where you get your money to make the games, to go to them. People play them in their location, their businesses thrive. The board game is refined in the best way it can be as a result, and then you go to Kickstarter, for the big one.
I think we're going to see a change in how manufacturing and stuff like that is going to happen anyway, because of several kind of political things kind of going on with regards to just importing and exporting anyway. We've spoken about the tariffs with regards to goods coming in from China into America, which is potentially going to affect the entire tabletop industry, not just people sending goods into the US. We've got the implications of what's going to happen after the end of October with regards to kind of imports and things like that as well. So, I just discussed this kind of like the other day regarding kind of, quite simply, UK manufacturers, and like you said, well, as I say, is there space maybe for manufacturers to do smaller, dirty print runs, basically knocking off 100 games to allow businesses to do what you're kind of, what you're currently doing kind of yourself. In terms of the Kickstarter itself, you're not going to be running your Kickstarter until basically into it's not going to be as in March of next year. Is that the kind of the date that you had on? There's this date you've got on your website, so I'm taking that as gospel, but you can obviously correct me if I'm wrong, Dan.
One of the interesting things as well is that when people talk about trust, there's trust in that the product will be delivered on time and what have you. And what we've learned in this journey, because we've just ordered a quantity from China, had it go on different boats, have it sail around the world, have it been delayed by about 5 weeks going into America, we've learned a whole load of lessons about having extra copies because copies get damaged in transit.
Mm-hmm.
There's whole loads that we've learned just by doing this small run that has been experience that we wouldn't have had if we hadn't have done it. So when we come and approach the gaming industry as first-time publishers, now that we've got the experience to do it, we're in a situation whereby, you know, we can convey that and hopefully give confidence to people wanting to back the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you said about the Kickstarter date, we originally had all of our ducks lined up for the 1st of October 2019. And because the ships were delayed by a significant period of time and it threw everything back, we're just getting the final copies arriving to their final destinations in and throughout North America today, I think. We're in a situation whereby, from doing a load of research on Kickstarter itself, we didn't want to launch in the Christmas months, so we've pushed it back to the 3rd of March 2020 because of that. And also we were also in two minds about it as well, because we were thinking, well, initially if the copies would have arrived on the 1st of July, we'd have had all of July, August, September, so 3 months for people to play the game before they pledge. And in pushing it back to March, I think that having a much longer period of time will enable more people to give us more feedback. And I think that we're quite pleased in some respects that the shipping was delayed, so that we can get more feedback in before we actually hit the button and say, okay, this is going to be the final version of this.
Have you thought about a final price then? Or the pledge levels, is that a discussion to be having after a relaxing Christmas?
So the game that's out in the world right now, we think that it would price between $85 and $89.
Mm-hmm.
From going to Gen Con and playing with about 150 people, we've had some feedback about having resource trackers and other components of the game, and all of these things cost more money. So we're trying to listen and take on this weight of feedback, and we've had a couple of people post on our social media around the world in the last few days, and we've heard from them that resource trackers seems to be a thing, so we're listening. But if we introduce a whole load of components that just weren't there previously, then the knock-on effect is that we think that this is going to up the game by, say, another $10. So we reckon that we'll get the game to probably being $99 game.
Okay, that's cool. If people have listened along tonight and they're interested in keeping an eye, I mean, even, or if they're a retailer and they're interested in kind of keeping an eye and maybe kind of reaching out to you guys as well, where do you exist on the internet webs?
So our website is www.landerthegame.com.
Okay.
And through there, you can find our social media channels at Lander the Game on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Cool. Okay. And we'll make sure that we put those links into the show notes, so we've got notes to show.
Thank you very much.
If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, you know where we are. Don't be silly. Go search We're Not Wizards in Google, you'll find us. Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and we've got our blog, and we've got our website, and we've got our YouTube channel, and we've come up on all these ridiculous podcast catchery places that don't. Some of them have got the word pod in them, some of them have got the word cast in them, and some have got neither in them. It's ridiculous.
Just wizards.
Don't even try. You're doing so well, and then you made a big huge mess at the end, like an excited puppy. If you like what you've listened to tonight, there's a couple of things you can do. Don't do what Dan did. Do something different. No, you can tell somebody else about us. You can reach out to us on podcast@we'renotwizards.com if you'd like to consider coming on the show. Or you can tell somebody else about us. Tell us a friend, tell a neighbour, tell somebody you don't like, tell some random on the street. I don't know. Just it helps spread the word of our nonsense out there. Or you can jump onto Apple Podcasts and you can give us a subscription, which is nice. You can give us a rating, you can give us a review. If you are going to be giving us a rating or review, quite simply, do not give us 10 stars, because I'm sick of all the 10 stars we're getting. But also, don't give us a 1 star, because if you do, we kind of get upset about it. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average, then we're just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average tonight, rather wonderful, rather fantastic, Mr. Dan Alexander. Thank you very, very much for coming on, sir.
Thank you very much. And lastly, just go into your local, in inverted commas, cafe or venue and play Lander now before we go to Kickstarter on the 3rd of March 2020.
You got play time. You got 6 months. You got lots. You got 7 months. Do something. Get out your chair. That's what we're saying to you. There's only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Dan?
No, we are not wizards.
Fantastic. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Dan. Say goodbye, Dan.
And this is goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll 6s, and what's the Zoolander thing again?
The important question that you need to ask is, are we making an animal-based prequel to this game?
Yes. And are you calling it? Are you calling it Zoolander?
That will be a conversation for your next podcast, Richard.
Okay, that sounds good. But until the next time, bye.
Goodbye.
No, you hang up. No, you hang up.
No, you hang.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.